The plane suddenly ran out of fuel while flying in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The pilots could only watch helplessly as the engine stopped running. From the cockpit, all they could see was the vast ocean surrounding them. On this pitch-black night, 306 people found themselves suddenly facing a plunge into the deep sea at an altitude of 10,000 meters, a life-or-death situation. Why did the plane suddenly run out of fuel? How would the captain save the precious lives of the passengers in this critical moment? Hello everyone, I'm Che-Ji. Today I'm going to tell you the true story of Oceanic Airlines Flight 236's miraculous survival. On August 23, 2001, the busy Toronto Pearson Airport experienced a peak in nighttime departures. The A330-200, which was being refueled, was set to carry 293 passengers. On Oceanic Airlines Flight 236. Flying from Toronto to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, which is 6,250 kilometers away. Captain Robert Peach returned to the cockpit after completing a walk-around inspection of the plane, which had just undergone an engine replacement, and began preparing for the flight with the first officer. Robert Peach was born on November 5, 1952. He learned to fly at a young age, and it was only natural for him to pursue a career in aviation as an adult. Flying in the harsh natural conditions of Quebec for many years, he developed skilled flying techniques. However, good times didn't last long. Quebec Airlines was forced to lay off employees due to mismanagement, and Captain Peach lost his job and source of income. Encouraged by some idle individuals in society, he began flying planes to smuggle special plants from Jamaica to the United States for a living. On June 21, 1983, Peach was flying a Piper aircraft and had just landed at Tatnall County Airport in Georgia, when police, who had been waiting for some time, found over 220 kilograms of special plants on the plane. Scurf was sentenced to 10 years in prison. After serving 18 months in prison, Peach was released on parole for good behavior and returned to Quebec, Canada. In 1995, Oceanic Airlines, which was in a period of rapid growth, urgently needed experienced pilots. Despite his unsavory past, they hired the seasoned Peach as a pilot. In 1999, Oceanic Airlines introduced the newly launched A330-200 aircraft, and Peach completed his training to transition from the L1011 TriStar to the A330-200 in the year 2000, the same year he was appointed as captain. As a very advanced wide-body aircraft at the time, the A330 only required 2 pilots to complete transatlantic flights, with the other pilot being First Officer Dirk de Jager. This young and handsome First Officer is just 29 years old. In the year leading up to the incident, he completed the A330 conversion training and had maintained a good flying record since he started flying. At 8:52 p.m. local time in Toronto, Mandarin Airlines Flight 236 took off with 46.9 tons of fuel. The weather was good that day. After flying over Lake Ontario, the plane rose to a cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. The 2 pilots in the cockpit relaxed. According to the plan, Flight 236 would arrive at its destination, Lisbon, in 6 hours. However, at this time, the 2 pilots did not know that there was an imperceptible and fatal hidden danger in the fuel line of the right engine of the aircraft. And this would completely change the fate of the flight 4 hours later. A week earlier, on August 15th, the maintenance personnel of Mandarin Airlines discovered metal debris in the oil system of the No. 2 engine during a routine inspection. The following day, they found more foundational debris during the inspection. Since they couldn't determine the source of the debris, the airline decided to replace the No. 2 engine of the aircraft. Rolls-Royce happened to have a spare engine stored in Quebec, so Mandarin Airlines borrowed this engine, numbered 4105, for use. The work to install the new engine began at midnight on August 17th. The engineers had to remove the original engine. During this time, prepare all the parts, and then install the replacement engine, connecting all the systems, and installing the accessories, as well as testing the engine. They needed to complete all this work within 48 hours. Time was tight and the task was urgent. Any problem in any part of the process could cause the plane to miss its flight mission 2 days later. As the saying goes, what you fear will come to pass. The next day, when the engineers were installing the hydraulic pump on the replacement engine, they discovered that the borrowed engine was equipped with an older model of the hydraulic pump. The new hydraulic pump removed from the replaced engine. couldn't be installed on the borrowed engine due to a conflict with the position of the fuel lines. Subsequently, the engineers used 3 different computers to check the new line configuration from the company's intranet. But for some reason, luck completely denied him access. At this time, the replacement work was already far behind the original schedule. Since the hydraulic pump couldn't be installed due to the line conflict, couldn't we just modify the lines a bit to make it fit? In desperation, the engineers took over from Canada and followed the engine experts' advice, installing the mismatched hydraulic pump along with the affected fuel lines. The engine had no issues during the subsequent test runs. Due to the weekend circumstances, during the engine replacement, there was no quality control inspector on site. The engine replacement work for this aircraft was accepted without any checks. The technicians happily finished their work late Sunday night and went home. 4 hours after takeoff, Vietnam Airlines Flight 236 had already crossed the center Atlantic. The crew discovered a strange issue while performing routine checks on the aircraft's instrument parameters. The oil quantity in the right engine is much lower than that in the left engine, and both the oil temperature and pressure are abnormal. After consulting the manual, the crew found no description of this unusual combination. They had no choice but to contact the maintenance center for help via high-frequency radio. After studying the situation, the engineers informed the crew that they were also unclear about the cause of the anomaly. After discussing, the two believed that, with all other engine data being completely normal, the 3 abnormal oil indicators were likely erroneous values caused by a sensor issue. However, in reality, this unusual signal was due to a fuel leak in the right engine. When replacing the engine, although the engineer left enough space while installing the mismatched hydraulic and fuel lines, he didn't take into account that the flexible hydraulic lines would deform once the hydraulic system was pressurized. The 2 pipes thus produced high-frequency vibrations generated by the hard contact engine, causing fatigue fracture of the hard contact fuel pipe, forming an L-shaped crack that was 80 mm long and 2.5 mm wide. Half an hour before the crew discovered the oil abnormality, fuel in the right tank had already begun to leak out of the engine. So why did the crew fail to find the imbalance between the left and right fuel tanks during this inspection? This is because the A3302 aircraft has a trim tank installed in the rear horizontal stabilizer to maintain a balanced center of gravity during flight. The fuel balancing system transfers fuel from the rear to the front based on changes in the aircraft's center of gravity. It was this forward transfer of fuel that compensated for the leaking fuel from the right tank. So, from the instrument's perspective, both fuel tanks always appeared to be in a balanced state.